In this lesson, we're going to talk about slopes. Slope is a very important concept in algebra. In geometry, we're going to relate slope to some future lessons, but it's important to get a basic understanding of what slope is and the various ways we can calculate slope. So slope has a formula of m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So what does this all mean? Well, first off, m in slope came from a mathematician named René Descartes. And René was a French person who's more famous for his map work. And in French, I believe the word mountain, which was a symbol of slope, starts with the word m. And so that's why we use m for slope. So that's always something confusing. It's not a big deal, but it's interesting to know the history behind where some of this comes from. Now, the 2's and the 1's in the coordinates represent one of 2 points given. So we need 2 points given, and we need to figure out the distance vertically, which is this, and the distance horizontally, which is that. So the top numbers are the distance going up and down, often called the rise, and then the x value is the distance horizontally, called the run. So in the past, if you've had a lesson on slope, you've probably have heard the term rise over run. And what that means is the vertical change over the horizontal change. Now, I always start with the leftmost point, and by doing this, I try to simplify things for you. So in English, what all this means is how far up or down do we go, and then how far to the right. And we're always going to the right because we start from the left. Okay, so consider these two things part of a fraction, top of the fraction, bottom of the fraction. So let's look at a couple examples. Now in words, it's important to understand the words. So this number 4 would be represented because it's positive. That means the slope would be going 4 up and 3 to the right. Okay. Next example, the negative 2 tells us we're going to go down 2 and right 7. Okay, and you can come up with any fraction you want. It's going to be the same way. The bottom number is always to the right, and the top number is either up or down depending if it's positive or negative. Okay. Now, in this example here, we only have a whole number. Now, a whole number is a rational number, and those can be written as a fraction. So the number 3 can be written as the fraction 3 over 1. So in this case then, this is positive 3, which tells us we're going 3 up and 1 to the right. Okay. The next example is a negative 5. Just like the previous example, we can write that over 1. So negative 5 tells us to go down 5 and 1 to the right. So once you have this foundation of the words, the other types of problems will become a little bit more clear. The next type of problem is in the graph. Okay, so if you're given a graph, can you find the slope? Now, similar to the words, we're going to start from the very left point, and the words will dictate what the number is. So in this case, we have numbers going to words. Now we're going to go from words to numbers. So we start at the very left point, and the first question we have to ask, well, here, from the left point, how far up or down do we go? And then that number is going to go on top of the fraction. So in this case, we go down 1. So this slope will have a negative 1 on top. Second question, how far to the right do we go? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we go 4 to the right. The third step is, do we need to simplify? And the hint for most of the problems for the hint, can we divide the top and bottom by 2 or the top and bottom by 3? Those two questions, if they're possible, very likely are going to be able to simplify the fractions in most of them. There are other ways to do it, but essentially we're just simplifying fractions, and those are two very common ways to factor or to simplify a fraction. In this case, we do not need to simplify it. An example would be something like this. What if we had a slope of negative 4 over 8, for example? Right, well, both of these can be divided by 2. So we would have negative 2 over 4. And if we look at that, we can divide that by 2 again. And so then we would have negative 1 over a positive 2. And so you would keep simplifying or reducing until you can no longer do it. But again, using 2 or 3 is probably one of the easiest ways for most of the problems that we're going to have. All right, so now let's look at how we do it by points. Okay, So now by points, we can do it two ways. We can still use this same way, or we can do it in the formula, and I'll show you both. So from 2 points, what I would recommend first is we're still gonna do these things, but I'm gonna add a step 0. And the step 0 is to just sketch the graph. And we're sketching the graph because we wanna figure out what point is on the left, okay? So this would be -1, +2, it would be somewhere here. This would be 3 over and 1 up, okay? So this point is our leftmost point, okay? So now from there, we wanna figure out how far up and down it goes. Well, the y value, the second number in the coordinate, is the number that goes up or down. And so if we start at 2 and we end up at 1, we're going down 1. So that number would go on the top part of the fraction. Since we're starting at -1 and we're going to +3, that is a distance of 4. And so in this case, our slope is 1/4. Now, these coordinates are the same coordinates in the graph. So what I did in this problem, we did it the graph way, and I did it with the coordinate way, and you notice that in the previous example, we had gotten 1/4 as an answer. Okay, so you could use this method on a graph, but I think most people would do the counting way is a little bit simpler than doing this. Now, what about using the slope formula in this case? Okay, so I'm gonna call this the second coordinate and this the first coordinate because it doesn't matter which way, okay? So the y value, 2, is this value, and then I'm gonna do the opposite of the other y value. So the y value on the right side is 1, the opposite is -1. Then I have -1, and I'm gonna do the opposite of 3. Okay, so in this case then we do 2 minus 1, which is 1 over -4. Now in this case, we can't simplify, but the negative should go with the top part of the fraction. So our final answer is -1/4. Again, however we did it, we got the same answer. So there's multiple ways to do it. I don't have a preference which one you do in class, but you may find one's a little bit more easy to use, okay? All right, the last thing is special slopes, and there's 2 of them. One of which is a slope that goes sideways. And if a slope goes sideways, using the same idea that we have here, how far up and down do we go? It goes 0 up, and then however many to the right that you want to go. So in this case, I'm just going to make up a number 3, because say it's 3 coordinates away. So 0 divided by 3 would be 0. Okay, so the slope for this is 0. Now, the second special slope is a vertical line. And if I were to, again, separate these things, 3, we would go up 3 or down 3, it doesn't matter, and then 0 to the right. And when we divide by 0, we get an error or some type of message in the calculator that says that is not okay. So this slope is what we call undefined. Okay, and in a way, it's an impossible slope. So if you ever divide by 0 for slope, it's undefined. So that's a quick review on slope, doing words by a graph, using points, and talking about special slopes, and my simplified step version on how to interpret the slope formula.